I don't know that I've experienced a year quite like 2020. Just when you think that it couldn't get any crazier, all these little things, and you guys are all with me on this, I'm sure, from the coronavirus and the quarantine to, in May, murder hornets, and now they just caught the nest, a couple weeks ago, but then one bee, they think it's from the same hive, hopefully, was found in a town. And just like it's been multiple things, one after another, even to where we sit this morning, it's just craziness. The craziest experience I've ever seen in an entire year. And I was thinking about it this weekend. I'm like, does anybody even remember January and February of 2020? Like what? I mean, because ever since March, it's just been like this whirlwind of craziness that has gone on. And this morning, I just feel like the Lord really wants to adjust our perspective to make sure that we're focused on what we should be focused on. And that is Him. Psalm 66, if you turn in your Bible, I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. Psalm 66:1. The writer of the psalm says this, and know this, that the writer of the psalm, we don't know what atmosphere he was in when he wrote this psalm. We don't know what circumstances he was going through, but we do know that he did not hide the troubles that he had faced. And yet he does three things for us in this psalm. Number one, before I even start reading it, you'll notice in the first few verses, he teaches us the lesson of putting our eyes upon God, praising God for who He is, because praising Him opens the door to more of God in our lives, to more peace in our lives. And then He'll make a transition to not just who God is, but to what He has done as a reminder of the testimony of who God is. And then finally, He gets to the troubles and the tribulations that He's faced in life. Psalm 66, 1-4. He says, shout joyful praises to God, all the earth. Sing about the glory of His name. Tell the world how glorious He is. Say to God, how awesome are your deeds. Your enemies cringe before your mighty power. Everything on earth will worship you. They will sing your praises, shouting your name in glorious songs. That's what He's calling us to do. Even in trying times, He's calling us to spend our time praising God. And then it says interlude. That's the pause. Now, I don't know what they did in their interlude. I don't know if there was a moment of reflection and silence, if the music kept playing, or if there was some sort of dialogue that took place. But there was this pause, and I would like to think that when we praise God, that we would pause before we take the next step. Give that moment of rest and silence, because when I get done praising Him, it changes my heart. And rather than focus on the trials in front of me, I'm able to remember the good things that He has done behind me. And the writer goes on in verse 5 and he says, come and see what our God has done. Somebody say testify this morning. What awesome miracles He performs for people. He made a dry path through the Red Sea, and His people went across on foot. And there, we, His people, not He Himself, but He's interjected Himself into the story of what God has done for His people. Notice that. This isn't just a God that is in the history of the Bible, but I am interjecting myself that we, God's people, were able to walk across on dry land. It was for me as much as it was for them, because that brought us to where I am today. I was a part of that story. God didn't just do it for His people then. He did it for His people then. He did it for His people in the Old Testament. He did it for His people in the New Testament. And He did it for us today. That was for us. And that's what the writer is expressing. Come and see what God has done. His people went across on dry foot, and there we rejoiced in him. For by his great power, he does rule over us forever. He watches every movement of the nations. Let no rebel rise in defiance. I want to reassure you this morning that he watches every movement of the nations, that God is not unaware. It's not like he can't see what's going on. Verse 8, let the whole world bless our God and loudly sing his praises. Our lives are in his hands. Everybody say, in his hands. And he keeps our feet from stumbling. So listen, what's he describing here? He's describing, of course, the time that the Israelites were rescued from the hands of the enemy and miraculously rescued through the parting of the Red Sea. And even when it looked like the only thing in their life that was certain would be their death, God reached down and rescued the nation. Now, if we're being honest and you didn't know the rest of the story, and looking out here, most of you do, you might think that when God delivers his people and rescues them in such a miraculous way, and he safely brings them to the other side, if he would go to such great lengths to bring his people to a certain place in life, that once they arrived at that place, that it would become a bed of roses. Now, don't lie. When you've been delivered from something, when you've been saved from something in life and you get brought to a certain place, you think, now life is going to be good. I mean, the only thing that was certain over here was I was facing death, and now I'm on the other side, and instead my enemies have been destroyed in life. Like life is all of a sudden going to be easy. It's going to get a lot better. You know what? I'm going to have a happy life now because God rescued me from slavery. He rescued me from the wrath of the enemy. He rescued me from death, and now he has set my feet on solid ground as he split the Red Sea, and everything's going to be okay. But with a bed of roses, we also should know that every rose has its thorn, and adversity comes. And that's why he would say in verse 10, after praising God and being reminded of what God has done, he would say to God, you have tested us, O God. You have purified us like silver. You have captured us in your net and laid the burden of slavery on our backs. And then you put a leader over us. We went through fire and flood, but you brought us to a place of great abundance. There might be some of you here this morning that feel like that is your story in this year. I've heard people express everything throughout this year from fear, anger, sadness, confusion, and even despair. Last week I talked about the why. In order to deal with all of this, we often will ask the question why. And today I don't feel like the Lord would have me veer too far from the why question. Because right now in life, for whatever reason, there might be some people asking another question that is very similar. And that question is where? The where. Where is God? Where is God in all of this? In all of this craziness that is going on this year? In all of this craziness that is going on in my life personally, where is God? It is essentially the same question that people ask whenever there is a catastrophic event, whenever there is something major that affects their lives, or there's some sort of heartache that takes place. And it is called the problem of suffering. And the problem of suffering always leads to this confusion about an all-powerful God that supposedly can prevent suffering, but does not prevent suffering. I preached a sermon about this, some of you may remember, in early 2019. And in early 2019, the way I addressed it was pertaining to the idea of the original sin. the curse upon creation as a whole. And yet man given free will to choose good, to choose evil. And that yes, according to Revelation 21:4, there will be a day of restoration. There will be a day where there is no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be no pain. But that day is not today. That day was not yesterday, and it will not more than likely be tomorrow. Right now, we live in a world that is both influenced and impacted by people's freedom to make choices. We do live in a world that is still suffering the repercussion of sin, and this is the real inconvenient truth. However, this is not the sermon that I'm preaching today. I know that right now in our church, there are people that are dealing with the fear of suffering. What I mean by that is the what ifs. What if? And the what if can also often drive fear inside of us. Drive us to make decisions based on the what if fear that comes. There are people right now that are truly hurting in our church. And I can tell you that most people I know are dealing with some sort of uncertainty in life. And it is in these times that temptation comes to doubt God, to doubt other people. Most often, this is when people start asking the question, where is God? When I was writing this, I was going to go another direction. And then I just felt like, as I dwelt upon the question, where does this question come from? Because when it comes to believers, I don't think that any of us ask the question really thinking that God is missing. I believe that most often we will ask the question of where is God when we have come to a place in our life where we can't control it. Think about it. When life is good, to say that God is in control is easy because nothing feels out of control. Oh yeah, life is good, life is great. I don't have a lot of problems or issues right now, and those that I do, they're minor issues, they're nothing big. You face your day-to-day battles, but I get through them. You know what? God is in control. I mean, the truth is, in the good times, you could possibly be in a little bit more control than you realize, but life is good, so you don't recognize. But you don't question who is in control in the good times. However, when you have to start dealing with something, I mean, what you believe about God being in control is only truly revealed when you come to situations in life that you cannot control. Where you will ask the question of, how am I supposed to handle this? What am I supposed to do? Because I don't know what to do in a moment like this. And when you get to those moments is where you are tempted to begin to ask those questions. God, where are you? And sometimes in these moments we need to stop and recognize that we can only do what God has given us control over, not the other way around. And we got to leave the rest up to Him. So I have a proverb that I want to spend most of our time this morning on, chapter 21, verses 30 and 31. I'm going to read it from the NIV, which is not a translation I normally use, but I like the way it translated it, and it translated it correctly. The proverb says this: there is no wisdom. Everybody say no wisdom. There is no insight. Say no insight. There is no plan. Say no plan that can succeed against the Lord. Did that leave any room? The word no means no. Verse 31, the horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory rests with the Lord. For all that is going on right now and for all that might be going on in your world or somebody's world that is close to you, God's word through this proverb is reassuring us that there is no such thing as someone who is so wise that they can outsmart the Lord. There is no such thing as a person or a group of people that have deep insider knowledge that will get around the ways of the Lord. There is no plan. There is no plan against your purpose, no plan against your future, no plan against your well-being, no plan against your family, no plan against your country. There is no plan that can succeed against the Lord. For whatever you think that is going on right now, you have to understand that God always wins. Final outcomes are always in his hands. It is his will that will ultimately prevail. Now, no matter what it looks like, we've got to learn to rest in that. And this passage clearly points out this exact thing. There is something that I am held responsible for, that you are held responsible for. There is one thing that he says here that I can control, and that is how well my horse is prepared for battle. All too often, we are going through the hills and the valleys of this thing called life, and we are asking the wrong questions. We ask questions based on whether I'm winning or am I losing. We ask questions based upon what we think our life should be as being successful or being failures. We ask questions that have more to do with our circumstances. Things are good right now. Things are really, really challenging, difficult, hard, and crushing right now. We ask all sorts of questions, but we are not asking the right question. Because the right question that we should be asking is, how well is our horse prepared for battle? Because in the end, that is all that we have control over. I want to show you this from two battles this morning. We're going to talk about two battles. Battle number one, you can turn to Joshua chapter 6 through 8. I don't have the scriptures because it's 3 chapters of stories here. So I'm just going to kind of summarize them. Chapter 6, we see the first battle. The first battle that God's people face right before they get brought into the promised land. You have to understand, into the place of abundance is the battle of Jericho. Now, Joshua is in charge of the situation, right? Moses has been kept on the other side. Joshua is put in charge of the people. And the Lord tells him, I want you to take my people, the followers of God, and I want you to bring them into the promised land. And everybody cheers, yay, we get to go into the promised land. Did they forget what it was like to cross the Red Sea through that great miracle and what happened on the other side? Was it a bed of roses? Now they get to cross into the long-awaited promised land, everything that we have looked forward to in life. This is success. I want you to lead them into the promised land where it will be a bed of roses. No, the first thing they have to do when they get across to the place of success and abundance is they then have to battle. They've got to go to war. There's going to be challenges that will take place. God says, I want you to defeat the city of Jericho. Now understand, Jericho was this well-fortified, large city that, and here's the deal. God gave Joshua specific plans for them to have success. And I want us to think about those plans. God gave his people instructions for success in the land of abundance. Now, mind you, the instructions that he gave would not have come from a worldly military commander. It wouldn't have been like one of the generals of the army that says, hey, I've got this all figured out. We're going to do this, and we're going to surround, and people are going to go one way and then come from another way, and we're going to launch arrows over the walls, and we're going to launch balls. Like, it wouldn't have been your ordinary plan of attack. If we were to go in man's wisdom in the land of abundance, they never would have got it. God gives instructions that go completely against the ways of the world, the ways of culture, and the ways of common sense. He still does the same thing today as he has given us instructions for success in the land of abundance. And whether we understand it or not, most of those instructions seem to be a little bit backwards. They seem to go against the ways of society. They seem not to make sense to a whole lot of people. But there is a reason for that. So he gives them these instructions. And what are they to do with those instructions? They took those instructions. It said that they would march around the walls of Jericho for 6 days. Go around the walls of Jericho 6 days in a row. On the 7th day, I want you to march around it 7 times and then blow the shofar. That's it. The walls will come down and you'll be given victory. There's some final instructions that he gave to them, that everything that was made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron would have to be given back to him for a purpose, for his purposes. And most of you know the story. In their preparation, that was the only thing they're responsible for. Because if they would prepare, their preparation was simply to follow the instructions of the Lord. I gave you instructions to follow. Whether they make sense or not, whether you view them as the path to success or not, trust me, here's my instruction. Whether it's what everybody else would do or not does not matter. All you have to do to prepare your horse for battle is follow my instructions in your daily walk. And that is exactly what they did. For 6 days, they followed God's instructions in their daily walk of life. And then they were given that victory that we hear about. The walls come tumbling down. And when you think about it, when the walls came tumbling down, there was no question of where is God, was there? They didn't have to stop and think, where's God? No, they just won. And there's no question of who is in control, because all they did was prepare themselves, their horse, for the battle by following his daily instructions in their daily walk. And God took care of everything and gave them success. There's no question, where is God? That God is in control. That was the first battle. However, right after that, there was a second battle. The second battle is the one that I want to talk about today, that was still in the land of promise. It was still in the place of potential abundance in life. This is a place where there was the path to great blessing, the opportunity for success in life. And when it came to this battle, the battle of Ai, I want you to understand that it was a small battle. It wasn't even a big city. This wasn't a great battle in life. This wasn't something like, oh my, look at the walls in front of us. Are we ever going to get over them? Can we ever get through them? Will we ever conquer this in life? This was a little battle. Oh, it's sometimes the smallest things in life that mess up Christians. We think we need to prepare for the big ones. The little ones are no big deal. In fact, sometimes when we know we're facing a big battle is when we'll prepare the most. We kind of suck things up, and we start making sure we get in God's word and we're following his instructions in our daily walk, because we're trying to be tight, to button things up. We got to do this right if we're ever going to overcome this. But it's the small battles, the day-to-day battles, the ones that shouldn't take much effort, that all too often mess up God's people because we have not prepared rightfully for the small battles. And so in the story, this is a city that was easily conquerable. Shouldn't have been a big deal. And so Joshua, his response to a small battle in life is to simply send a few soldiers to battle for them. All we need to send is like 3,000 guys, and they're going to destroy this city. And so it was to everyone's shock and dismay that all of those soldiers come running back in retreat because they just got their heinies whooped. 36 of them were killed retreating. God's people were literally routed. Why? Nothing was wrong with their battle plan. Nothing was wrong with the army for God. Nothing was wrong with the 36 brave warriors that gave their lives that day. Just when things seemed to be going so good in life, we've finally crossed over. We've made it to the other side. We're standing in the place of promise. We are in the land of opportunity and great abundance. We've just conquered this great enemy in life. Life could not be any better, and yet there's a loss. People are hurting. It's obviously something that is out of control. And so I'm sure there would be some people that would start asking the question in those moments, where is God? Where are you in these circumstances? Then they'd start looking at the facts with man's wisdom instead of God's wisdom because they're acting from a place of hurt. And they'd start saying, well, you know what? They'd falsely believe that had Joshua spent more time in prayer and asked the Lord, maybe the Lord would have had him to walk circles around that city too. Maybe they didn't follow the same pattern that they did in the previous city for victory. Maybe their daily walk should have been different. Maybe they missed something. Maybe they should have sent more men into battle like they later would to destroy the city. 20,000 guys, 30,000 guys, maybe they would have easily destroyed that city. But that's not the truth, because had they sent more men just would have died, because that misses the point. The battle wasn't lost because of man's wisdom. The battle was lost because one man named Achan decided that God's instructions did not apply to him. And he was a part of that family. He was a part of that nation of people. And because of their interconnectedness, when no one was looking, he made a choice. Everybody say choice. When no one was looking, he made a choice to keep some of the riches of Jericho for himself. And in the end, what he did was sin against God. Because of Achan's sin, 36 families lost a son, a brother, a father, a husband. Those who were killed in action and their grieving families, they weren't responsible for Achan's actions. They were simply caught in the results of his freedom to choose. For those who were left picking up the pieces, they learned the lesson that the battle was lost in the unseen realm. No one could have known that the choices would be made, that were made. It was out of their control. Sometimes I think when it comes to situations in life, we take too much credit for Jericho, and we take too much blame for Ai. And then we become disillusioned and confused when the battles that we think should be won are lost. I believe that there's a certain steadiness and emotional health that comes in accepting the fact that there are things in the unseen realm that we will never know, that we will never understand, and we will never be able to control. Different circumstances, difficult circumstances, are not as devastating, and life's successes are not as seductive when we understand that we really have nothing to do with the results. This is why it's important to understand the difference between our responsibility and God's responsibility. What we are in control of and what God is in control of. As it said in Proverbs 21:30-31, there is no wisdom. It doesn't even matter what somebody thinks, how smart they are, how well they might have crafted a story. There is no wisdom. There is no insight. There is no plan. Man can make his plans, but it's the will of the Lord that will succeed. Even when it may not seem like it, even when it may not feel like it, even when it may not feel like it or look like it, God is still here. He is still in control, and he still has the whole world in his hands. Verse 31, the horse is made ready for the day of battle. You are only responsible for what you can control. What you can control is your daily walk following the instructions of the Lord. How well is your horse prepared for battle? Like God's people before the battle of Jericho, do you prepare yourself by following his instructions in your daily walk? Because listen, it doesn't mean, which we should, but it doesn't mean that we're going to have success in every battle. How many know that some of the 36 men that died that day followed the instructions of the Lord that day? It does not mean you'll have success in every battle. But when you understand his word, victory rests with the Lord. So I want to end this morning by saying this. Even when it may appear as everything's falling apart like it's made of sand, I want to remind you, he still holds the whole world in his hands.